Hi everyone, my name is Luke Carriere, Chief Marketing Officer of Witbe, and we're here to speak about the new OTT Experience. So that's not a typo. Actually, as they said in the keynote this morning, the future of TV is now. So the OTT Experience is now, and there's a new OTT Experience, which is we'll talk about in just a moment. First, I want to introduce the panel. So they're going to share their insights with the audience about the industry, the market, and OTT technology. If you could just share your name, title, and value proposition of your company.
Okay, thank you. My name is Oliver Lietz. I'm the founder and CEO of nanocosmos from Berlin, Germany. We provide a live streaming platform called NanoStream Cloud with ultra-low latency live streaming worldwide, which is running on all browsers. So it includes a web-based HTML5 player. And with our platform, you can go live around the world in 1 second.
And I'm Luke Dyer. I handle customer engineering at Google Cloud. I focus on our media services within Google Cloud. Google, as you all know, provides a number of services within our cloud group. Of course, we provide kind of the fundamental cloud components of storage, compute, and networking. And within our media services, we have some SaaS, software as a service products for broadcasters specifically, and other media workloads on Google Cloud.
So my name is Laura Delcor. I'm VP of Marketing and Communications at Nice People at Work, a big data and business intelligence company for the online media industry. So basically, we give real-time insights about how your platform performs and your users behave across the entire journey, from the moment users log in until they log out, so that you can manage all pillars of your video service, not only within the playback, but also what's going on with, beside or outside the playback, what's going on with your UI, what's going on with your content catalog and recommendations, what's going on with your billing process, your commercial packages, pricing. So it's important to get data in real time, even predictions, and being able to segment your audience to understand how any of these technologies that you'll see here today are impacting your quality of experience and how you can leverage to engage that audience.
Great, thank you. So, variety of perspectives on this new OTT experience. I want to get to know you personally a little bit and your connection to OTT. So maybe if you could just share a professional experience or your proudest moment in OTT, something that it might be a use case or an innovation or some kind of success story.
Yeah, so my background is engineering. We started also as an engineering company providing software codecs for the broadcast industry. And we saw the greatest, let's say, innovation by introducing our own live stream player for ultra-low latency. We saw that coming actually as a flash replacement, which is, of course, important for everyone, but it's starting to accelerate and getting more use cases on the board. Due to that low latency approach, we are seeing many customers coming from different verticals, separate from the broadcast industry, and then we created a platform around that to really provide that service worldwide. We saw that the end-to-end approach is very important to take into account, so not do a mix and match of different technologies, but have everything under control. And that was our greatest, let's say, steps forward in the last couple of years to provide that whole platform with a low latency approach to really enable new use cases and going beyond standard OTT applications.
Great.
Yeah, I've been in the streaming industry for about 10 years. Started about 10 years ago at a small company called Uyala. We had, at the time, explored object recognition in video. And to get a good platform for that, we needed everything else. So we were one of the first to create some cloud transcoding services and integrated services for segmented media delivery through Flash at the time. That evolved into a number of products. Had a first integrated paywall, first integrated analytics solution for video streaming, as well as went on to acquire some companies for things like integrated ad serving and SSP capabilities. And so had a number of, a lot of different exposure points to the streaming media market, and have been kind of along for the ride the whole way.
Very nice.
I would just say that I've been for over 10 years in the B2B marketing, different industries though. So when I first joined this industry, the video industry, I was more on the client side or the user side. And because of my position in marketing, sometimes basically what I do is help translate the value of products into words to the different segments can understand. So help sales team or help other companies understand why data is so useful. And somehow it's kind of like evangelizing or an educating role here. So today I don't have a technical background here, so I think that it'll be a very balanced conversation. The one thing that I'm very proud about the product that we launched, or that we launched, and it's been here for so many years at the moment, is that now we are offering full session monitoring. So we have different vendors offering or telling what's going on within your platform, what's going on outside your platform, where your users come from. But when you're able to correlate all that data and contextualize your decisions, then you kind of make more holistic decisions and approach. And it's very interesting to see that as the more mature is the industry and users and companies, the less we're focusing on quality of experience because we kind of take it for granted, but we move to business teams who are now getting on board into using data to make data-driven decisions.
Fantastic. A wealth of experience up here from the panelists. Thank you for being here. I want to get to know the audience a little bit so that we can share the relevant stories with them. Could we just take a quick poll of any audience in a few categories? How many audience members are content owners or providers? Just raise your hand. Okay, several. How many are aggregators or distributors? Okay, a couple. And broadcasters, cable operators, MSOs? Not so many. How many are involved in managing an OTT platform, service, or application in some way? Okay, most. Great. So today's themes, we're going to talk about content. We're going to talk about interactivity, the viewing audience, the infrastructure and technology, and the market and industry. So back to the subject of the new OTT experience. What does that mean as compared to the old OTT experience? What defines a new OTT experience?
Shall I begin?
It's up for...
So I see that the new kind of applications go beyond standard OTT, which means in former times it was one-to-many. It was a kind of lean-back experience where you have the broadcaster and the big audience is watching an event or a show. And now it's getting more and more interactive. The audience gets involved, and that creates a lot of new use cases. And there are also specific industries like betting, auctioning, gaming, which rely on these interactive elements, so which cannot work with the standard OTT, so it's a completely different industry then. And so there's a shift we see in these kinds of applications where these new kind of industries come to the broadcast and want to add video to their solutions, but don't bring the expertise which was required in former times to do video. And so that's not that heavyweight setup required. It's more like many-to-many applications. It's 24/7 operation, go instantly live anywhere around the world and just rely on a service and platform which you can use to embed that into your own business environment. So that's things I see in the OTT space which are somehow not only changing but also adding things which are coming new to the table.
Yeah, just to add there, I think sort of the transition from one to many and being able to provide additional experiences, many-to-many experiences and different things that the digital transformation affords. I think there's kind of a general convergence from sort of the traditional broadcast and being able to send those signals, say, over the air or over cable, and sort of the digital-first media that many of us, if you've been coming to this show for a while, is where many of those things start. And those types of things are converging to a place where you can have things like low latency streaming, or some of those things that are maybe influenced out of gaming or mobile applications, and being able to bring that into an environment that traditionally was operating over coax cable and a more traditional format. So the things that you see from both the quality and performance expectation, the difference between whether that's coming over broadcast or whether that's coming through an IP-based network, in many cases is one and the same to an end viewer. How those workflows are managed, how rights are managed, the systems that those content creators or content producers and content distributors use for that content, in many times is one and the same. So I think with that comes new ideas that people say, well, this gaming platform or in low latency environments, this auction platform had these capabilities, these features to engage an audience. And I think you'll start to see more of that in some of the more traditional applications.
Yeah, I would add that over the last probably a couple of years, we've been hearing about personalization and targeting your audiences, so understanding your audiences and using that interactivity and those technologies that can agile or can make those interactions possible. So what we're seeing here is that personalization is going to, its peak at the moment. When we add the use of data to personalize, but we also add artificial intelligence technologies so that we can generate content metadata, so that we can either generate more content, for example, sports highlights specific for the players that you like, for the teams that you like. Then it's when we're getting more interaction, and that's where we see the hyper personalization that we're seeing at the moment, so that you can build dynamic offering almost.
Yeah, I think also to add some more, the business model fundamentally changes as well. So in typical OTT fashion, you kind of adopted the old process of where do you make money? You either make that from subscription, you make that from transactions, or you make that from advertising. And advertising was more kind of the common model that most of the digital natives adopted in providing short form content, pre-roll interstitial advertising. But now even especially in low latency cases, especially in cases like gaming, you have ways of rewarding producers through sort of digital bits. We'll go into the sort of cryptocurrency type of applications, but there's lots of other applications that are starting to gain attraction or adoption, high-priced emojis, high-priced stickers, sort of these digital transactions and the exchanging of digital goods in digital worlds. It's kind of another model that especially is influenced by gaming, but I think is starting to reach into other mobile applications and mobile gaming environments that not just esports is adopting. So I think that's pushing it, but other people are getting ideas from those types of applications.
Great point. Speaking of that interactivity, what would you say is required in order to create those kinds of experiences and have that kind of interaction from a technology perspective?
So it needs to be available everywhere, basically, so on all devices and for instant access. So we see a big shift towards the mobile space. Of course, that's important for all platforms, but especially in gaming and interaction things, users are more used to use mobile devices for that kind of experience and not go to a big screen. So they just want to instantly be a part of that engagement. And so we've seen customers suddenly picking up their mobile use above 50% of the whole volume. So that's things we need when you add these interactive elements. The audience is also shifting their use a bit from these big screen towards mobile screens as well. And that means that you need to have that enabled on whatever device you're using, of course. So it's not like using a set-top box where you have a remote control and we have a dedicated player, but it's more like an instant browser experience where you open the browser and be part of that interaction.
Great.
Yeah, I can stole all the good answers, but I mean, in addition to, right, you need a great network. You need scalability. Oftentimes, how you scale the use of that, in a many-to-many environment or a one-to-many environment, right? You don't know necessarily if you need to warm up those servers for 10 users or 1 million users, and so in the case of where you're adopting maybe this hybrid broadcast model, being able to scale beyond sort of the typical application that you've designed and know, how would it scale to 1 million users? How would it scale to global usage that's pulling from an endpoint that's very far away from where that content originates? And so, I obviously look at it from sort of the scalability of that application on the network side, scalability of the compute resources that are used to render and deliver and encode that video. So being able to provide all of those services within an environment that can easily scale and allow producers to innovate, that's where I typically look at it. And the CDN delivery of the network is generally the longest, lag in that whole chain too.
Speaking of the business models you mentioned earlier being one of those interactive features, what new business models do you think are necessary to attract and retain and grow audiences, or if not model features necessary for that?
I would, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say that I'm not sure we'll see new business models. We'll probably see a match of them or a combination of some of them. I would say that we'll see some innovation for the existing ones. So for SVODs, we'll probably see more innovation in terms of product life cycle, introducing new features. It's not about expanding content, because we've seen that major OTTs or major SVODs at the moment, what they're doing is reducing their content catalog. Some of their content catalog was already, I would say, underused, but that's probably because of how acquisition of content is made at the moment. But then I'd see them not only focusing on quality and on content, but also about the entire journey that I was mentioning before. What's going on with the people, with the 2 million people who's watching your content, but what's going on with the other 1 million people who logged in, but is not consuming content? Is it because they cannot find your content? Is it because your recommendation is not appealing to them, is not relevant to them? So it's very important to track that to ensure that engagement. So that now in terms of SVOD, when you talk about advertising-based platforms, I think that we'll see more innovation in terms of probably more targetization, as we're seeing at the moment, and eventually targeted product placement. So when we see the same movie or the same episode or a live, probably not live, but we'll see that somebody drinks a beer, which is, you prefer one, and I'll see a different one. We could also see things that we've been seeing in video gaming, like buy this product to continue watching. That's, of course, more focused on VOD, but I think that it will, in terms of innovation, it will lead the trend for live streaming to follow.
In terms of, you mentioned VOD, and we're seeing an unprecedented amount of spend by companies on developing new series and content this year. Are you more bullish on VOD depth of content libraries, or on the move toward live streaming and providing more live experiences for audience?
So I learned this lesson from my 5-year-old son. I think both. So if I ask him Play-Doh or Legos, he'd usually say both. So I'd go with both in that case. I think. Sorry. Oh, that's my mic. I think in those. Most kind of the trends are moving from programming to programs. And so most consumers are buying programs when they think of how are they going to spend their dollar, and are they going to spend $10 for this service and $10 for that service and $10 for that service. Ultimately, they're deciding based on the programs in that catalog that they're buying. Whereas kind of the general model that's proliferated across most of the broadcasts is programming. So if I asked you, like, did you watch Netflix last night? You think of a program. Did you watch YouTube last night? You think of a program. If I say, did you watch, say, NBC last night? Like, you're thinking like the general programming that they're providing. And so you have lots of options. And I think given that in a program-based environment, you can pick and choose which of those programs you ultimately are paying for. The analytics is what's going to tell them whether that model should evolve. And I think that's why you've seen so many subscription services launch and then they adopt maybe an ad model, because they know that based on their data, they're learning that, okay, we could get more subscribers, or at least we could get some revenue from this additional ad model. Maybe convert them later on once we implement certain more advanced options to filter or provide or recommend additional content. And so I think you do see both. Live is definitely a part of it. It attracts an audience. It attracts sort of an attention span and an experience that most people are used to. But most people, when they're spending their dollars, they're thinking of a particular program they have in mind, a particular team they want to watch. It's not about the full 24/7 programming that is part of that live channel. So more more content definitely helps in that.
And I also see that the successful business is already bringing a business model with it and not putting video on the channel and then looking for a business model, but it's like, for example, in auctioning, you already have a business model. In retail, when you do home shopping channels or whatever, you already do some sales, you have a revenue channel, and so you would like to add video to have additional benefit from that. So it's, when you think about that, not only focused on the content itself, but also on the type of application you're using. Is it a specific solution you are providing in the, let's say, real-life world already? Or will the video streaming part add additional value to get more customers on board with your business model you already have established? So that's things we see also in this space coming from our customers.
What I think it's very interesting to see is that depending on how important quality or being fast or how immediately having errors or being slow impacts on your revenue streams, it'll drive or it'll put your focus on how your business model should be. So now back to your example about gambling, we've got a customer who was recently speaking. He was saying that latency is their key metric, but of course they want to ensure they don't want to compromise quality, because as a user you are placing a bet. You don't want to think that there's no fair play because there's some pre-buffering, but at the same time, following the rule, casino always wins. So they want to short latency so that more bets are placed, and at the same time they want more rounds, so there's more money to the casino. And as a user, I don't want to get frustrated because it's high latency. I couldn't place my bet, and also there's buffering. So they're not playing fair.
And that user experience getting transparent to the customer is very important. So solutions you have with the Euboro platform, and which is a great addition to our platform, which we have established with joint customers together to get these metrics enabled and some analytics to really get some insight about what is happening on the client side, to get some value and some real quantified metrics about the user experience at the user is very important.
Sure. Speaking of the quality metrics, that came up a couple times in the keynote this morning, how important quality is in broadcast quality. If there's the Venn diagram of something high quality, fast, or cheap, which trade-off do you make? Which two do you choose? High quality, faster, or cheaper? Is it possible to have all three when you're architecting an OTT service or interactive application involving video like you're talking about?
I would say that the three of them at the moment are possible because of their solutions. Cheap, we always want cheap. Everyone wants cheap. We need fast, but again, depending on the industry or the vertical, it doesn't, I don't know, the video gaming, the gambling, the live sports, because you don't want, the classic example, you don't want your neighbor to shout out the goal, or so depending on the vertical, quality will be more or less important. But I think that I got lost here. Sorry, I just lost the thread.
I think ultimately, like you want to build for today, and you want to sort of design it for the future. And so if they're sacrificing something that fundamentally, if you're betting against yourself by trying to save money, that's usually not a great strategy for succeeding. So I think in all those categories though, like the unit economics of trying to build a system that is maybe on not, especially when you get into low latency, you can get into sort of non-standard practices, which may sort of build you into a corner in the future. And so I think to the extent that you can, adopting standards, which doesn't always mean the best latency, unfortunately. So maybe you do need to sort of explore some of these broader, more hybrid capabilities. But the nice thing is, all of those things are coming down precipitously, and there's a lot of competition in that space. So you should be able to get fast, cheap, and high quality.
Nice.
One of the things that I was saying,
Sure.
is that what we've been seeing, looking at data, is that users tend to be more tolerant because of the here and now effect. They tend to be more tolerant to largest join times or to even interruptions or streaming events, though that doesn't mean that they are engaged. They are just captive audience, which means that there's a risk for you as a video streaming service if new competitors come in, if you don't have exclusive content or original content that you're producing, which means that not only your technical team should have data, but also your business team, so that you both get aligned and make decisions, holistic decisions that I referred earlier today.
And you also need to define the quality, of course. So what kind of result would you expect, and how do you interpret these metrics? What goal would you like to achieve? How do you measure that? And so it's not always the video quality, it's latency, it's the interactivity, maybe the user engagement somehow, that's also part of the quality. So it doesn't make sense, for example, to send a stream with 4K 25 megabits from an auction. Right. So that doesn't bring any value, so that more is counterproductive and even adds cost to the streaming bandwidth consumption. So that's very much dependent on the use case and what you would like to achieve. So we've seen many applications in that medium bitrate market and have metrics for successful business running, not only dependent on video quality, but also other things which you can measure in the whole workflow end to end.
Sure. So if old TT, what I'm gathering is the new OTT experience is really based on interactivity, these services, whether it's, you mentioned some examples, auctions or gambling or e-commerce, retail e-commerce involving video. If that's a new OTT experience, are the traditional broadcasters and traditional content providers who are just now adopting an old OTT experience of one-to-many distribution, whether that's SVOD or ad revenue driven, are they missing out by not thinking outside of the box in terms of what they could really offer with interacting with the viewer and consumer as opposed to just displaying video and ads? Do you think they'll take up that challenge, or is it two distinct markets, one offering services and one offering content?
So I think it seems like they need to pick up the challenge somehow. I'm not exactly sure if they do. So you see that in the success of platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, whatever, which are not really broadcast applications. So that's also kind of shift, and still that's a bit separate. So these kinds of social media style applications are separate to the traditional broadcast stuff, but it's having so many viewers and eyeballs in the applications that you sometimes don't notice that, because that's a different generation, and I see my kids watching more YouTube than anything else. So that's something I think the traditional broadcast industry needs to be somehow aware of to also do more engagement and communication to their viewers, and somehow think about the applications they would like to engage. Sure.
Yeah, I look at them as more separate and distinct at this point. I think broadcasters, are looking for the most scalable, the most standardized, the most performant and way of delivering, and that oftentimes kind of moves a little slower than some of the stuff that we're seeing kind of on the ultra low latency front. And so I think latency increasingly matters, and that's continually kind of a question that comes up with broadcasters. I think for the longest time, broadcasters, they're competing against a TV that's 5 or 6 second latency at the lowest, and then maybe artificial latency maybe is introduced into that as well. But if you have a TV in your house, you're not watching that same stream on your device, so they're okay. But when you step outside the home and they're delivering those sort of OTT experiences, then there's additional pressure to say, hey, well, I can do X, Y, Z in a gaming environment or an auctioning environment, or through some of the new and novel apps that are creating interactivity through ultra low latency, and that's certainly applying pressure into a broadcast environment where we say, hey, how can we bring down the overall total trip time of a video? And that is certainly being done. And I think if you see and look at just standards like HLS, there's been sort of some pressure there to sort of bring down the overall chunk size and what can you do and how can you adopt better ways of segmenting the content and delivering that content on a standards base like HLS. But then looking at how do you introduce some of the hybrid approach that's sort of more born out of sort of the WebRTC world and bringing those two types of things together. Mm-hmm. So I think right now they're mostly separate and distinct, but I think you're starting to see some convergence there.
Sure. So I'd like to do a little quick fire round of questions where I'll pose a question to the group, and then you each have kind of 1 minute to give your perspective on it. So what would you say is the main keyword to succeed in OTT?
Interactivity.
Convenience.
Personalization.
Okay, wow, that was fast. Any want to expand on that a little, briefly? Just interactivity. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean that the audience engagement creates larger audiences and more chance to somehow also create revenue streams and be part of somehow more connected to your viewers, and not only for these viewing applications, but also, of course, for other specific vertical applications which require these interactive applications.
Okay.
Yeah, convenience, I just mean, it's about delivering to the device, to the viewer. It's not necessarily the medium at which you broadcast that device. And so making the application available, convenient to access, convenient to find content, convenient to search and use that application and find that content's key.
To me, personalization, it's basically delivering or giving what customers want so that they stay engaged. And that probably includes both answers.
Sure. Putting the customer first, that's a recipe for success, definitely. Next question, long-term, in the long term, what would your streaming prediction be? Say 5 years is long-term in this industry. Do you have any streaming prediction, what changes we'll see in 5 years?
Difficult question, of course. I see that the discussions are still very much focused on engineering and technology. So it's like HLS or Dash or whatever do I need WebRTC, but it's more on a higher level that you need to provide a solution which really works. And usually the users don't want to worry too much about these technology questions. So I see more shifting towards end-to-end solutions, complete platforms, cross-platform approaches on all devices, things like that. That's not 5 years away, but maybe 2 years away. So I'm not there to look much further.
I think just a continued influence from kind of the bottoms-up approach. I think you start to see areas like esports and gaming sort of pushing the direction of the expectation from the end viewer on how video is delivered over the internet, and I think those types of things will continue to add pressure. One of the projects really interesting within Google, unrelated to sort of video streaming, but nonetheless, Project Stream, streaming 1080p, 60 frames per second, gaming. So no hardware on the device. All that hardware lives in the cloud, at least on Google. And so being able to play a game that reacts to presses of the button and visually renders and displays that. I think things like that will continue to push sort of the expectation of, well, if you can do that with gaming, what can you do with streaming media and broadcast video?
5-year prediction?
Yes, my prediction would be that quality will be no longer the queen, at least for entertainment. I can't say the same for video gaming or the new applications that you were mentioning before. And so we'll need innovation in terms of business models, in terms of full user experience, to keep the subscriptions or even to grow user base, which is something that so far we've been steadily growing user base. But now at some point it'll stop.
I like that. We'll get through the quality challenge that everyone's facing today. Nice. Last one, the best one. Do you have a a strong conviction, but might be unpopular? So not trying to cause any controversy here, but just something that maybe you believe that maybe the rest of the industry might not know about or might not see the same way.
Yeah, I was trying to mention that already, that the OTT broadcast industry needs to somehow see the challenges they are facing and somehow see the shifts which are coming around with the internet and availability everywhere and all that stuff. So I think that's a good danger to keep to that kind of heavyweight approach and keep things like they did in the past, in the last decades, and somehow think about beyond that, what they are doing right now. So that's something maybe I see that there might happen some things to that industry in the future.
Okay, if you posted something on LinkedIn or tweeted something, what would solicit the strongest reaction from your followers, their opinion on the industry?
I don't know, I try to stay free from controversy. So, no, I think just back to a little bit what I said, just sort of the influence of gaming. I think the number of people that are streaming content now, I mean, the number of people that have gone out to, just to stream their own gaming experiences and downloading OBS or XSplit or sort of open source software to get that, I think that's just brought a lot more people into the conversation of, what is the limitation of video and how do we get beyond those limitations? And so I think, maybe not an unpopular opinion, but maybe not a consensus opinion would be where I think that has probably a more profound impact than we maybe realize now, is the impact that sort of the draw that gaming has brought into live streaming and the attention of, what can the protocols really do, and are these the right protocols to be using? Are these the right framework in which we should think about how we deliver video? Because much of it has been adopted from a traditional model that moved, in large part just on-premise, satellite, up, down, not over a terrestrial network that today, matches essentially quality, performance, capability that we could do, 20 years ago. So I think there's a lot more innovation to be done there.
I like that, bullish on gaming, underappreciated piece there.
As an influence, yeah.
I think that the paradigm has changed, and as I just mentioned, quality is king and content is queen, when it used to be the other way around. So some people will disagree.
Nice, I like it. Great, so we want to leave some time for questions from the audience, but really quickly want to give you a chance to share the best way for the audience to get to reach you afterwards, maybe just your key message to leave the audience with, and then also where they can find more information about your company.
Okay, thank you. So nanocosmos has a booth here at the show, so you can see our platform running, and you can also easily try this. So there's a field trial available for our CDN and solutions. So that's available at nanocosmos.de or webpage. And so feel free to join us at the booth and talk about how that works.
Yeah, cloud.google.com. It powers some of the biggest applications from Snapchat to Spotify to anybody who wants to go to cloud.google.com and sign up for an account. So you're welcome to find me afterwards, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll be around the show for the next couple of days.
Great.
nicepeopleatwork.com, easy to remember. And I have some of my colleagues here from the New York office. I'll be around, so we can chat afterwards.
Fantastic. Great, thank you very much to the panel, and we'll take questions from the audience, if anyone. Yes?
Are there examples of...
Oh, she's got a mic for you, just one moment.
Do you have examples of or commentary about 4K, considering how many 4K consumer TVs are out there now and people are getting used to that? Is there an application, and if so, where, and how do we overcome some of the challenges?
Great question.
I think an IP-based network, for most people, if in the room you think of, have you seen 4K content? If you have, you probably saw it delivered over an IP-based network. And so I think the capability is certainly there. If you look at content on YouTube or content on Netflix, right? How are they getting that to your home? That's over 4K. And again, they're using protocols that are designed for internet delivery. Those protocols are consistently getting tweaked to bring down latency, but oftentimes that's on-demand content. I think 4K content, you remove, it's obviously a larger file to write, larger file to read, but the more we can do to bring down sort of the overall segment size, if you're talking HLS or CMAF chunks or other ways of approaching latency, 4K can certainly be included in the lower thresholds of that latency.
I see a demand for 4K actually in applications like VR and 360, which is part of the ecosystem, of course. It's starting to gain some attention, but quality of HD, of course, is too low for that. But for a standard flat screen, you don't need to have that 4K maybe on a mobile phone. Very much depends on the use case, but for, let's say, large screen, 50-inch screen, you might need that. But I don't see much of use for that for mobile devices and the mobile network because the bandwidth is just not there.
Great. Any other questions? I just want to leave off. Oh, yes.
Where do you see 5G impacting my question was more around the role of 5G as far as the OTT delivery on devices and probably how that correlates into 4K and some of the other offerings that we'll have.
Question about 5G and devices. You mentioned how important mobile is.
Yeah, of course, it's good to have a good network. If the availability is there, then you can have lower latency in 5G. You have higher bit bandwidth in 5G, but you need also to adapt and be able to have accessibility also if you're moving around, things like that. So I see a potential in that, but that's, of course, future still.
Yeah, I mean, I love just the topic of 5G, ATSC 3.0. I think sort of those two things, 2020 is going to be a very interesting year, and how sort of the rollout and adoption of these new capabilities that haven't been available to sort of the general audience of video, and then what that means once you can gather more data, can gain more insights from that audience, and just more people are focused on how can they, not just broadcasters, but how can anyone get content to an audience that's consistently connected over IP is very interesting. And I mean, the implications of that for 4K and everything else, I think it just will have a lot of ripple effects throughout kind of the whole streaming media conference. So it'll be interesting.
Yes.
I'm just gonna go for it. Okay. So you guys talked a little bit about the distribution of thinking about new OTT in terms of interactivity, and in particular, I think Oliver, you talked about different areas that are not specific to, or different industries that are not specific to content distribution necessarily, but they are providing some sort of OTT interactivity. Where are you seeing that, and I guess this is for any of you, and certain verticals in terms of adding some sort of interactive video component as part of a way to either engage existing customers through a different business model, or increase average revenue per customer overall?
Yeah, that's auctioning, iGaming, betting, also monitoring security where you need to have a low latency, and also webcasting, education where you need to engage with your viewers somehow, so teacher-student relation somehow. So all different kinds of applications which are not really coming from the broadcast space, but more like focused on specific use cases.
Okay. Same industries. It's very interesting to see when for every specific industry they can identify or determine what are the metrics they want to measure. So apart from the classic ones that we have for content streaming, when you want to know the number of bets that are placed, how frequently, and like peak times, like the hour times or peak times that you see for television, same thing. So as long as you determine what are the metrics that you want to measure, it's exactly the same.
Other examples of interactivity, a survey or polling application during a live broadcast or something like this. Yeah. Great. Well, I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank our panelists for their time and expertise and sharing that with us.
Thank you.